By the morning of October 14th, 2023, Tanya Williams had been living in her 2009 Honda Civic for 11 weeks. Her two daughters, Maya and Jade, ages 6 and 9, were curled up in the back seat under a comforter they had taken from their old apartment before the landlord changed the locks. The temperature outside the car was 38 degrees. The engine was off because Tanya couldn't afford to waste gas running the heater overnight. She had $312 left in her checking account, no job lined up, and a phone that was 2 days away from being shut off. She was parked in the lot behind a Baptist church on 7 Mile Road. The pastor had told her she could stay there as long as she was gone by 7 in the morning on Sundays. That was the arrangement. That was the closest thing she had to stability. 3 months earlier, Tanya had been a warehouse supervisor at a distribution center on Detroit's west side, making $19 an hour with overtime. She had a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side, a stable routine, and a life that, while far from luxurious, was hers. The girls had their own room, they walked to school, there was food in the fridge, and the rent was paid on time. Nothing spectacular, but it was solid. Then the warehouse closed. The parent company shut it down with 2 weeks' notice. No severance, no transition assistance, just a printed letter and a cardboard box for desk belongings. Tanya had $1,400 in savings. The rent was $950 a month. She did the math in her head the night she got the letter, sitting at the kitchen table after the girls fell asleep. She had maybe 6 weeks before the money ran out completely. She started applying for jobs the next day. Over the following 9 weeks, she submitted 47 applications. She got 3 callbacks. 2 of them went nowhere after the interviewer asked for a permanent address, and she hesitated. The third offered her a night shift position that would have required leaving her daughters alone from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. She turned it down. Within 6 weeks, she couldn't make rent. The landlord gave her 1 extension, then changed the locks while she was at a job interview. She came home to find her apartment sealed and a notice taped to the door. She was allowed to collect essential belongings under supervision. She grabbed clothes, the girls' school supplies, the comforter, and a photo album. Everything else stayed. The shelter system in Detroit was overwhelmed. Tanya got a bed at a women's shelter on Cass Avenue for 2 weeks, but the facility didn't allow children older than 5 in the women's section, and splitting up from her daughters was not something she would agree to under any circumstances. A family shelter had a 3-month waiting list. A transitional housing program required proof of employment she didn't have. Every door she knocked on had a condition she couldn't meet, so the car became home. She figured out the system quickly. Hospital parking garages were the safest places to sleep because security did rounds, but rarely knocked on windows. Church lots were quiet on weekdays. She kept a gym membership active for $10 a month so the girls could shower. She washed their school clothes in gas station bathrooms and hung them over the front seats to dry overnight. She packed their lunches from groceries she bought at the dollar store, white bread and peanut butter and canned fruit. She walked them to school every morning, looking put together enough that nobody asked questions. Maya, the 6-year-old, thought they were on an adventure. She told her classmates they were camping. Jade, the 9-year-old, knew better. She stopped talking about home entirely. She stopped asking when they were going back. That was the reality of Tanya's life. The morning she found a flyer stapled to a telephone pole outside a community center on Gratiot Avenue. It was a notice for a Wayne County tax lien auction. Properties that owed back taxes were being sold off, most of them vacant lots, and crumbling houses that nobody wanted. Foreclosures, condemned buildings, the kind of properties that investors scrolled past looking for something worth flipping. But near the bottom of the list, between a duplex with a flooded basement and an empty commercial lot, was a single line that Tanya read 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. Detached garage structure, approximately 400 square feet. East side location. Starting bid, $250. Tanya drove to the address that same afternoon. What she found was not encouraging. The garage sat behind an abandoned house on a street where more than half the homes had been boarded up or torn down. The structure itself was a disaster. The roof sagged badly in the middle, bowing inward like a hammock. 2 of the 4 windows were shattered and stuffed with newspaper. The back wall had partially collapsed, exposing the interior to rain, wind, and whatever animals wanted to wander in. Raccoons had been living in the rafters for what looked like years. The concrete floor was cracked and stained with decades of motor oil and rust. A neighbor across the street, an older man sitting on his porch, watched Tanya circle the building 3 times. He called out to her and told her she was wasting her time. Nobody had touched that garage in over 10 years, he said. The city condemned it years ago. It's junk. You'd be better off burning it down than trying to fix it. But Tanya saw something he didn't. She saw 4 walls that were still mostly standing. She saw a concrete foundation that, while cracked, was fundamentally solid underneath the grime. She saw a roof that could be patched if she could find the materials. She saw roughly 400 square feet of enclosed space, which was 400 more square feet than the back seat of a Honda Civic. And more than anything, she saw a structure that could become a home for her daughters. Something the shelter system and the job market and the landlords of Detroit had failed to provide. She went to the auction 3 days later with $250 in cash, every dollar she had left after buying gas and a week of groceries. The auction was held in a county building downtown, a fluorescent lit room with folding chairs and a podium. There were maybe 30 people there, most of them investors and house flippers scanning printouts and whispering into phones. Nobody bid on the garage. The auctioneer almost skipped it entirely, moving straight from the duplex to the commercial lot before someone on his team pointed at the line item. He read it off flatly. Detached garage, east side, starting bid $250. Any takers? Tanya raised her hand, said $250, and waited. Nobody challenged her. The gavel came down. She owned a building. The first month was brutal. Tanya had 0 construction experience. She had never framed a wall, never patched a roof, never held a circular saw, never read a building diagram. But she had YouTube tutorials playing on her phone from morning until dark, a pair of $3 work gloves from the dollar store, and a stubbornness that the neighbor across the street would later describe as borderline insane. She started by gutting the interior completely. 15 trash bags of debris came out in the first 3 days alone. Rotting wood, old tires, broken glass, rusted tools, paint cans with solidified paint, newspapers from 2009, and enough raccoon droppings to fill a wheelbarrow. She hauled everything to the curb by hand because she could not afford a dumpster rental. The city picked most of it up eventually. Some of it she drove to a dump site in the trunk of the Civic. The collapsed back wall came next. She pulled the rotted studs out one at a time, pried the ruined siding loose, and stacked it in the alley. Rebuilding it required lumber she did not have and could not afford, so she improvised. 2 blocks over, a demolition crew was tearing down a condemned house. Tanya walked over and asked the foreman if she could take the plywood and framing lumber they were throwing into the dumpster. He looked at her for a long moment, then shrugged and told her to take whatever she could carry. She made 14 trips with her Civic that day, loading sheets of plywood and 2x4s into the back seat and trunk, driving 2 blocks, unloading by hand, and going back for more. By sunset, she had enough material to rebuild the back wall and patch the roof. She patched the roof herself, climbing up on an aluminum ladder she borrowed from the same neighbor who had called the garage junk. It took her 4 days. The shingles did not line up perfectly. The plywood seams were sealed with roofing tar she bought for $8 at a surplus store. It was not pretty, but when it rained on the 5th day, hard, a full October downpour, the inside stayed dry for the first time in years. Through all of this, her daughters were watching. Maya and Jade sat in the car doing homework, while their mother hauled trash and hammered nails 50 feet away. On weekends, they helped. Jade learned how to hold a level and read a tape measure. Maya swept the concrete floor with a broom that was taller than she was. They ate dinner in the car every night, peanut butter sandwiches, and canned soup heated on a portable camping stove Tanya had bought for $12 at a thrift store on Michigan Avenue. The turning point came in week 5, when Tanya mentioned the project to a deacon at the church where she sometimes parked overnight. His name was Gerald, and he had spent 30 years as a licensed electrician for the city of Detroit before retiring. He drove out to the garage on a Tuesday morning, looked the place over carefully, shook his head, and then came back the next day with a truck full of wire, outlet boxes, junction boxes, and a 100-amp breaker panel he had pulled from a renovation job that had leftover materials. Gerald wired the entire garage over 3 consecutive weekends. He ran the service panel on the east wall, installed outlets on every wall, wired overhead LED light fixtures, and connected everything to the utility pole at the alley with a proper permit he helped Tanya apply for through DTE Energy. The permit cost $75, which Gerald paid out of his own pocket and told Tanya not to worry about. The night the lights came on for the first time, Maya screamed and started clapping. She ran from one end of the garage to the other, flipping the light switch on and off, laughing every single time the room lit up. Jade stood in the doorway, quiet, watching her little sister. Then she looked at her mother and said, "It's starting to look like a house." Word started spreading through the neighborhood. A manager at a hardware store on Michigan Avenue heard about the project from someone at Gerald's church and donated 14 gallons of returned paint in colors nobody had wanted: dusty rose, mint green, a deep navy blue. Tanya accepted all of it gratefully, even the mint green. A retired plumber named Earl, a friend of Gerald's from the VA, drove over one Saturday and spent 2 full weekends installing a water line from the city main to the garage. He put in a utility sink with running hot and cold water and a standing shower stall in a partitioned corner of the building with a proper drain line that he connected to the sewer. Tanya offered to pay him. He said he didn't want money. He wanted Sunday dinner. She cooked for him every Sunday for the next month, and he kept showing up with one more improvement: a better faucet, a water heater he found on clearance, a toilet he pulled from a house he was working on that the owner was going to throw away. Inside the garage, Tanya framed out 2 small bedrooms using the salvaged 2x4s from the demolition site. Each bedroom was barely big enough for a twin bed and a milk crate nightstand, maybe 7 feet by 8 feet. She built a dividing wall down the center of the space, creating a narrow living area on one side and the bedrooms and bathroom on the other. The kitchen was a counter made from a sheet of plywood, a salvaged utility sink, a 2-burner hot plate, and a mini fridge that a woman from the church donated after upgrading her own. The walls got insulated with recycled denim batting that a textile recycling company in Hamtramck gave her for free after she explained her situation in a letter. The floors got 2 coats of concrete sealant and a patchwork of mismatched area rugs from Goodwill, a braided oval rug in the living area, a pink shag rug in Maya's room, and a striped runner in Jade's. The walls got 2 coats of that dusty rose paint, which turned out to look warmer and more inviting than Tanya expected. The windows, now replaced with salvaged frames Gerald found at a Habitat for Humanity restore for $15 total, had curtains Tanya sewed from bed sheets using a needle and thread because she didn't own a sewing machine. Then, 4 months in, with the finish line almost in sight, everything nearly fell apart. A city code enforcement officer driving through the neighborhood noticed the fresh paint and the obvious work being done on a structure that was still flagged as condemned in the city database. He pulled over, inspected the exterior, and taped a stop work order to the front door. The fine was $500. Converting a garage into a residential dwelling required permits Tanya had not obtained, inspections she had not scheduled, and approvals from a zoning board that was not meeting for another 2 months. The officer was not unkind about it, but the law was the law. For 3 days, Tanya did not touch the garage. She sat in the car at night, staring at the orange stop work notice taped to the door she had painted herself, and felt the same crushing helplessness that had defined the worst nights sleeping in hospital parking garages. She had no money for fines. She had no lawyer. She had a garage that was 90% finished and a piece of paper that said she was not allowed to finish it. But Gerald made a phone call. He knew a woman at a nonprofit legal aid organization on Woodward Avenue that handled housing cases for low-income residents. The attorney, a young woman named Keisha, took Tanya's case piano bono. She filed a response with the city arguing that the structure was being materially improved, not degraded. She pointed out that Detroit had over 30,000 vacant and abandoned structures at various points in the last decade, and that fining a homeless mother for turning one of them into functional shelter was, at minimum, a poor use of city resources. The Code Enforcement Office agreed to a compromise. Tanya would submit the structure to a full inspection, make any required safety corrections, and apply retroactively for the proper residential conversion permits. Gerald's electrical work passed on the first try. Earl's plumbing's passed with one minor correction, a missing shut-off valve that he installed the same afternoon. The structural assessment rated the garage as sound. The permits were approved 2 weeks later. 5 months after buying a condemned junk garage for $250, Tanya Williams had a home. It was 400 square feet. It had running water, electricity, 2 small bedrooms, a bathroom with a standing shower and a toilet, a kitchenette with a working sink and hot water, and heat from 2 wall-mounted electric radiators that Gerald installed during the final week. The total cost of all materials, nearly all of them salvaged, donated, or bought at deep discount, came to just under $1,400. Combined with the $250 purchase price, Tanya had built a home for her family for $1,650. The first night the girls slept in real beds, in rooms with doors that closed, with lights they could turn on and off themselves, and blankets that weren't draped over car seats. Tanya sat on the floor of the narrow living area, with her back against the dusty rose wall, and cried. Not because of what she had endured, but because of what she had built with her own hands when nobody was going to build it for her. 11 weeks in a car, 5 months of construction, 14 trips hauling plywood in a Honda Civic, Sunday dinners for a plumber, $3 work gloves from the dollar store. And now her daughters had an address. That was almost 2 years ago. Today, Tanya works full-time as a logistics coordinator for a small shipping company in Dearborn. Maya is in 3rd grade and recently won a school art contest. Jade just started middle school and is on the honor roll. The garage home still stands on that east side street, looking absolutely nothing like the rotting structure Tanya first circled on that October afternoon. She painted the exterior a bright yellow this past spring. There are flower boxes in the windows that Maya planted with marigolds. There is a small wooden sign by the front door that Jade carved in shop class. The sign reads, Williams Home. 2 other families on the same block, both headed by single mothers, both struggling with housing, reached out to Tanya after seeing what she had built. She walked them through the county auction process, introduced them to Gerald and Earl, and helped them identify salvageable structures in the neighborhood. One of them finished her conversion last fall. The other is still working on it. The broader reality behind this story is hard to ignore. Across the United States, millions of structures sit vacant and abandoned while families sleep in cars and shelters. In Detroit alone, the number has reached over 30,000 at various points. Meanwhile, the annual cost of homelessness to American taxpayers averages over $30,000 per person per year. when you account for emergency room visits, shelter costs, law enforcement, and social services. Tanya's $1,650 garage conversion cost the city nothing. It saved the shelter system a bed. It kept 2 children enrolled in school consistently for the first time in months. It turned a condemned structure on a blighted street into something with marigolds in the window. Nobody is arguing that a 400-square-foot converted garage is the answer to the American housing crisis. It is not. But when every system designed to help you has a wait list, a condition, or a locked door, and the alternative is another winter in the back seat of a sedan with your children, a junk garage and $250 can be the difference between hopelessness and a front door that locks from the inside. Tanya was asked by a local news reporter what she would tell other mothers in her situation. She stood in front of the yellow garage with the marigolds and the wooden sign and the 2 small windows with the bedsheet curtains, and she thought about it for a moment. Then she said something that stuck with everyone who heard it. Don't wait for somebody to save you. They're not coming. Save yourself. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe. I cover stories like this every single week. Real people building real lives when nobody gave them a reason to believe they could. And if you want to see another transformation that starts even harder than this one, that video is on screen right now.